Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Smart Water Wednesdays, where I am very glad to have my friend Max Moreno from Harvest Landscape join me to talk about what makes a good water manager. Welcome, Max. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Very exciting.
I love this picture of you. I stole this from the announcement of your recent nomination. I also wouldn't let myself sleep if I didn't just, steal some Aquamax and add a little bit of Aquamax into the conversation. So this is awesome. We were talking about it in the pre-show, but if you haven't seen Aquamax, I see him on my LinkedIn page almost every day. Definitely stop and look at what Harvest and Max are doing for just informational outreach for smart water management, tips and tricks that I think are super helpful and are super fun. So I just had to harass you a little bit about that. That was great. All the different faces of Aquamax.
Yeah, no worries. I got to give credit to our marketing team, Amanda Gray and Sierra Shinhoven and Steven Shinhoven as well. You know, they really thought of all this up, and they basically said, "Hey, can you do this?" I was like, "It's right up my alley. I'll be a team player on some of this." So, it's been great. My kids love it. Actually,
I believe it. It's awesome. It's funny, and very smart and witty at the same time. So today we want to talk about what makes a good water manager. And let me set this up a little bit. It's a conversation that started maybe a couple of months ago with one of my other great water managers, Joe Jackson out of Salt Lake City. We did the same framing of the episode, right? We see that in our industry, there is an emerging need for people we call water managers, which is different than the traditional irrigation managers of yesteryear. And as this role develops inside our industry, we find that companies want it, organizations want it, but they don't really have a good feel for how to go about getting it. So what our goal here today is just talk through with Max, who has a lot of experience and an impressive resume in this, kind of what we would look for. If I was putting out a job application for a water manager, what is it that qualifies a good water manager? What am I looking for? What are the things that a water manager has in terms of experience and knowledge and deliverables that differentiates them from a traditional irrigation manager? Does that sound right, Max?
That's correct. And actually, a few months ago, I helped publish an article for Landscape Management magazine in regards to this. They actually asked me for help because they had seen my role throughout the years as shifting from irrigation management over to water management. And this has been a growing need now, where we have a lot of clients, property managers, cities just asking us to manage their water, not just the irrigation. And really, it's been growing. There are a few people within the industry that I'm very close with. I'll throw out some shout outs later, that we bounce ideas off each other and experiences, because really it's experience. When I came into this, I basically saw what worked and what didn't. Until this day, we always try different things to see what worked and what doesn't. Because there is no guideline, we are actually developing that guideline, a few of us within the industry. So when it comes to shifting, the shift is happening for me. And basically what I have done throughout the years, you basically kind of have to start from the bottom up. One of the big proponents I'm for is education. Irrigation, it's evolving, it's dynamic, it's always changing. Being on the forefront, and when it comes to irrigation education, is key and number one. I've always told everybody you're only as good as your irrigation techs and basically your team. So one of my main focus is to get my team to have the latest in education. That's number one. That's our core right there.
So can you talk to me a little bit about how you're going about that? I've talked to others in your role that are driving at this, and it seems like there are many different approaches. So can you just high level kind of your strategy for training your internal team?
So training the internal team goes basically just from doing the simple irrigation adjustments and repairs. And it is a process. And that's one thing that I think a lot of us understand. When it comes to water management, it's not a product, it's a process. And with this, it's just training our guys just from the very beginning, from installing a sprinkler head to having the correct nozzle to basically going all the way into detail, knowing how to program a controller and putting in the zone attributes. So it's very key just to start from very beginning to the end. And it is a process.
And what I find in our industry, especially, is a huge part of education is re-education, because we have been trained incorrectly in so many cases. Like, I'm as guilty of it as anyone. Like that old mentality where water was cheap and nobody was keeping an eye on it has been ingrained in so many irrigation techs, that taking that out of them and putting in efficiency and visibility and accountability and sustainability is really a challenge. How do you take that on with kind of the old school guys?
Absolutely. It's kind of one of those things where some of the old school guys, where we really have to tell them, every little water droplet, we have to stretch it and use it to the full capacity. When it comes to saving water and implementing a good water management system, I like to set up goals. So right now, one of our biggest goals within Harvest is to have 100% smart controllers, weather tracks throughout our company. So we have a goal to have every single one of our clients to have on the weather track system, which is really cool. It's a B hack, but we're looking forward to it. We've come up with we're setting up the foundation and the strategy of how we're going to go about that. So that's what's super exciting on my end.
That's awesome. And one thing that I would offer into that conversation, when I talk to my cities and school districts, the standardization of that platform, just not necessarily WeatherTrack, but in this case, WeatherTrack, awesome. The standards make it easier to manage the portfolio, right? Because you do have that one place that you can manage everything and see everything, and nothing gets dropped because it's all streamlined through one information stream.
Correct, 100%. One of the greatest things about Harvest when I first came aboard was the standardization of the smart controllers, and it's great. I've always been a big fan of Hydropoint WeatherTrack, and when I seen the setup that was currently here, it was awesome. Now the way we started, when we talk about the subject of becoming a good water manager, it's now to the point where one of the first things I'm doing right now is analyzing all our properties and basically separating our high performing properties versus our low performing properties. What I'm doing with our high performing properties, the ones that are being proactive, they have the smart controllers, they have the rotating nozzles, they have drip areas, they're converting the turf. We're using those as case studies to show our low performing properties the capabilities and the outcome of saving water. So it's been great to have these foundation pieces and shifting it toward our low performing properties.
So when we talked before about the education, right, that first step in education is internal, and you want the company facing outward to have this message. But now you're talking about that education going outside of your doors, right? And kind of taking that to the market, taking that to your customers. What kind of, other than the Aqua Max, what are you guys doing to promote that?
We're doing various things. We're coming up with different programs so that the customers can take advantage of this, where it's almost like we're creating little internal case studies. And what we do is basically it's almost like where you have to put your money where your mouth is. So we'll say like, hey, we're going to do this one section for you as a test piece so that you can see it. So those are some of the options we're doing. We're also doing more detailed water budgeting. I know a few weeks ago or a month ago, you had Chad on, and I talked to Chad. He's one of the top guys, about water budgeting, and going through water budgets is super important, especially when it comes to from shifting the irrigation to water management, because now we're looking at the water usage and comparing it to ET to make sure that we're within water budgets.
Right. And I personally, I love that episode with Chad. It's gotten a lot of buzz, but I really think that that is the future of water management, right? Not, hey, you should give a smart controller, but rather, here is an allotment. Here is the amount of water we're giving you, and you have to manage into that, which is a whole different game than just kind of give it your best shot.
Correct, correct. And one of the things that I've always stated is, even though we have some of our sites on water budgeting and we're within water budget, the goal and some of the customers, their expectation is for that water usage to go down. And that's when you can basically tell them, hey, these are your areas where you can improve upon and become more of a high performing job, maybe reducing some of the turf, maybe converting over to drip. Maybe even upgrading to the OptiFlow, showing them where we can save every little bit of water. And we revisit, and my whole plan is to revisit it year after year to see how much more I can keep saving them.
Yeah, we had another great guest on last week. Andrew Chase gave us a perspective on what he looks at throughout the year to help drive those savings. And it's an ever-changing challenge on those sites. So it really does speak to the need for a detailed eye in that water manager position.
Correct. And that goes to the education piece, because I can see it and Andrew can see it, Chad, and even like a Danny Smith. Those are my shout outs because I talk to these guys all the time.
Awesome person.
Right. So we see that kind of stuff. I've been trained to see that. And it's educating the people now within your team to see that. So, we get educated, we pass that education on to our team because, I'm a firm believer that you're only as strong as your team.
Yeah, 100%. So when we drill back to the subject, right, we're talking about if you were going to hire a good water manager, the first thing on the list is a drive toward education, both internal and external, knowledge of staying on top of technology is what I'm hearing from you, right? Because that is an ever-changing landscape. And attention to detail, know exactly how to discuss these things with a customer. What else do you promote when you're looking for a water manager?
One of the things that I also promote is just, the systems in place. One of the things that people always ask me, the same question. I've got a few people on the LinkedIn that are always asking me, hey, we're trying to switch over from irrigation to a water management. One of the things that I like to promote also is just the evaluation of properties. Always reevaluate the property. And that's kind of where we had talked a little bit earlier about, one of my nominations of what I'm doing is basically coming up with a detailed report to the client, explaining to them where they're at and where they can be. It is a process. And I always tell people it's a process. It's not something that's instant. It's something that you have to keep reevaluating. I'm a firm believer that you need to know your properties inside out and know where the weakest points are and start on there, because that's where you're going to have your maximum water savings.
Absolutely. And when you are doing that, you have created your own customizable report. Can you give us a few things that are in that are common to bring up with customers? And first of all, when you're filling out that report, is that something you do by yourself and give your customer the report, or is that something that is an interactive kind of experience? Is that something you guys do together?
You know what? I've actually have had it done interactive so that I could show them. So, a lot of the reporting is basically, it's to the point where you're putting in the type of plant material, you're putting in the type of sprinklers, you're actually counting every sprinkler. Because you want to get as detailed as you can. You look at the landscape, it basically gets all the information and it generates a nice little report saying, based off of your landscape square footage, based off of your type of plant material, based off your sprinkler type. This is where you're at, and these are the areas that you can improve upon. And then this is basically what your water savings could be. And I've been very successful when I've been showing this to property managers and clients where they love the technology and the science behind it. And then afterwards, it basically brings up the question of how do we get there? How can we do it? And any good water manager will put together a plan of how to get there.
And that is where it gets personal, right? That is where your preferences kind of lay out. Do you have a checklist, or is it individual? Is there something that you think universally you need to add to get the project started?
Well, the first thing is, I do look at, do they have smart controllers? There's one benefit right there, because there's benefit for the clients and benefit for us as landscape contractors. I've always been a huge believer in smart controllers and the fact that they help us manage our time better. And then when I look at it, I look at the uniformity, I look at the standardization of parts. Sometimes we take over these old properties that have just a mixture of so many things. Just standardizing to one item, believe it or not, can bring up the uniformity, and you can maximize water savings there.
Finding 18 different nozzles on a station isn't good. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, finding maybe 3 different types of sprinkler types on one zone.
Yeah, that's drives me crazy. One thing I was trying not to lead you into this, but can you speak to where flow management fits into that conversation? Because I always stand on the soapbox that you can't manage what you don't measure. And different people have different opinions about where that flow sensor really fits into the grand scope.
100%. And one of the benefits that I always saw when it came to flow sensing is the fact that there's a lot of landscape companies that when they do internal checks, they're just checking the system. Having a flow sensor is really checking your irrigation for you, where you don't have to spend that time checking for breaks anymore. And that's actually one of the shifts. That's actually one of the big components from irrigation and water management. Because irrigation management, you're checking the irrigation. Flow sensing, you're now water managing, and the flow sensor is checking the irrigation for you. So it's actually a huge benefit.
And we've actually seen that in some of our national accounts where it has restructured their management style, their management contracts with their landscapers, where because we have those flow sensors in place, they don't have to have somebody out on site walking through the system every week. They know that if something big happens, they're going to catch it, and they can minimize the hours spent just walking the site, watching good, healthy irrigation systems run, and saving themselves dollars on efficient management as well. Is that something that you see and bring to your customers, that next level of management efficiency?
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the whole water management package. Usually I like to package smart controllers with flow sensing, so that when the customers talk about water savings, we're also talking about the water savings when it comes to breaks. I know I've had these discussions with a few of my colleagues in the industry, and I do see the benefit of this and the tremendous benefit. It's capturing the amount of alerts and converting it into dollars to show the customer, hey, believe it or not, these alerts are actually saving you X amount of dollars, because if this would have kept running, it would have wasted X amount of gallons.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should talk to my friend Charles, who's on the line. We actually have put that into a spreadsheet. You can quantify it. And it is astounding to think that one of those big rotor heads wastes a full bathtub full of water every minute that it runs. It's quantifiable. And another way to say that is you can deliver weather-based irrigation all season long and save and save and save a nickel a dime at a time, and then one mainline break can take all of that away, right?
Absolutely. And just the water damage alone, sometimes we don't quantify the water damage. What if it flooded a house? Who knows how much that would have cost? And from my experiences, like I said, every bad scenario has always been a learning experience for me out in the industry, and not having a flow sensor or master valve one time could have actually saved us from water running into this home that was on a slope. I mean, think about those kind of savings.
Yeah, we had one of our national retailers who had a mainline break where they had specified a flow sensor that didn't get installed. And that's how it came across my desk. But it caused slope failure at the top of the slope on a construction site. So literally the store had just been stocked and filled with the slope from behind the store, causing 7 figures of damage that would have been stopped by adding a flow sensor. What would have been, had they adhered to their water management principles, could have been avoided.
Absolutely, and those are some of the aspects a good water manager would explain to the clients when it comes to smart controllers and flow sensing.
Absolutely. So when you are looking for flow sensing, more specifically, I know that you are asked to help guide other water management projects that contractors around the country who are trying to do what Harvest is doing contact you and look for guidance on how to kind of where you started your process and how you're stepping toward building a successful water management division. What is it that we continue to look for in qualifying good water managers? What would you say a difference that you can tell in an interview is the difference between a water manager and an irrigation manager?
I think I've actually had this discussion before with Andrew Chase. Usually you can tell right immediately when the terminology starts to come about. So if I say a certain thing like pre-separates or, pressure regulating, and then if the conversation comes back and we start naming off products, that's how you know this person knows a little about water management. Then you start talking about, units of water or square footages or prop coefficient. You start to get into the whole aspect of like, okay, maybe they understand landscape coefficients. They understand irrigation uniformity. So to me, it's always been the terminology that leads us into the conversation, and it dives us into, kind of like the abyss of irrigation and water management. So,
and then when you're talking to those folks, do you how big of a part of the conversation is water budgets? Is that something that you are trying to put on the front burner, or is that kind of a stretch goal for what you guys are providing?
No, water budgets is extremely important, whether the system is low performing or high performing, because it starts to give us a gauge of where we need to be at. And really, there's a lot of now customer expectations for us to manage it, regardless if the site is low performing or high performing. The water budgets actually help us determine, and it gives us data to provide back to the customer. You can save X amount of water if you just invest in the smart controllers or flow sensing or drip irrigation. And we use that as a measuring stick constantly, monthly actually, and weekly.
That's awesome. And I really think that is the way to have it deliverable, right? To show the management behind the technology, because there are so many different facets of what you're bringing to them that the management has to remain at the forefront. You have to emphasize to your customers that it doesn't happen by itself. And these are all steps that can be mismanaged just as easily as they can be well managed. So hats off to you and all of the guys out in the field that are delivering those water budgets, delivering those savings. It is great work that you're doing. So before we wrap this up, anything we missed on our What Makes a Good Water Manager conversation?
I mean, honestly, I could probably keep going on about it as we were talking earlier and yesterday, but generally speaking, I think we covered the most important things.
Yeah, I think so too. Everything we talked about yesterday was on the list. So I really appreciate your time. And as we come to the end of the episode, I always ask my first time guests, what does WeatherTrack save you?
WeatherTrack has saved me. It's a two-parter. It's time and labor. Time is of the essence, and time is very important in our industry. And labor, more importantly now than ever. There is a little bit of a labor shortage, and the smart controllers have saved us tremendously because it helps us put the resources we have on other items, because the WeatherTrack controllers are taking care of the water management and applying the amount of water.
That is an awesome response. That is the number one thing that we hear is when I talk about this with all of my first time guests, the most common comment is the visibility that central management provides is a serious time saver. So I love to hear that. Let me jump to my slide deck. There's Aquamax again. We already talked about what makes a good water manager. I want to continue this conversation. I want to hear from you guys. If you have opinions on this I think is one of the most important things that we talk about. And I love Max's perspective. I'm likely to get my hands on another good water manager and make this a trilogy. So looking for people who have some opinions on this that would like to participate in the conversation. So if you want to participate in the conversation, email me at bcoffee@hydrapoint.com. I would love to hear from you. As always, I like to plug the resources and the support that we give. The 800 number that provides 6-day-a-week bilingual customer support, as well as the automated training program that is available through our learning management system at LearnUpon, where we provide free, on-demand, and tested and certified, and now also bilingual training. So if you're looking for more WeatherTrack training, check that out. Brings me to next week. One of the things that Max and I talked about today is managing those mainline breaks. And I have a great contractor here from Denver, the Denver area, Eric Hagan, who is going to join me, and we're going to talk about flow management in general, specifically about the anomaly of a mainline break and all that can cost you, all that goes into it, as well as the details of everything that WeatherTrack is doing behind the scenes. We'll really drill into the nitty-gritty details of the software response and some of the great troubleshooting tools that WeatherTrack has that when you're out on site as a water manager, you can use to try and diagnose and get to the bottom of those mainline break issues. Okay, it looks like I might have a question for you. Oh, from South Africa. It's not a question, just a hats off to you. So thank you from South Africa. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Okay. Max, I appreciate you, man. This was a lot of fun. This is something that I take very seriously. I hold this subject near and dear to my heart. I was so glad that you stepped up and were willing to join me and talk about this and lend your perspective.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was an honor being here, and I look forward to continue using the WeatherTracks. I mean, they've made my life so easy.
We definitely appreciate that. And if there's anything that I can do personally or we can do collectively to support you in that, let us know. And until next week, everyone, thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode of Smart Water Wednesdays.